Hey everybody, Dieter Kurtenbach and Larry Kruger here in the KMBR studios in San Francisco, previewing 49ers and Seahawks. Kickoff 1:25 on Sunday. Larry Kruger and the gang will have the pregame show for you on KMBR 680 starting at 10 o'clock. So breakfast brunch with Larry Kruger and the gang should be a blast. We just saw the Seahawks team play the 49ers a few weeks ago, effectively end Colin Kaepernick's career as 49ers quarterback. Seahawks haven't gotten a lot better since then. We thought that maybe after that game they would find their playoff form again. Tough luck loss to the Cardinals on Sunday Night Football last week. I still think this is a pretty good Seahawks team. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, but what are we expecting from a game like this? They just played. Obviously, the quarterback's different with Blaine Gabbert being under center, but should we expect more of the same, of that dominance that we saw on Thursday Night Football a few weeks back?
Well, I don't think it'll be a dominating effort, though, the Seahawks defense, there's a lot of different ways to look at this one.
Yep.
One of the ways is the 49ers have the lowest rated offense in football.
Yes.
And the Seahawks defense is still ranked second. So that's a very one-sided matchup that favors Seattle. But, obviously the Niners achieved that status with a lot of Colin Kaepernick, and they looked a lot better against with Blaine Gabbert at quarterback a couple weeks ago with the Falcons. I personally think it's going to be a low-scoring game again, but I expect the 49ers to keep this close. I don't think it will be a blowout Seahawk game. I think this is going to be a game where I think Seattle's going to win.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be by multiple scores, but I think it'll be close. I'll bet until about halfway through this fourth quarter would be my guess.
I see this game as an opportunity for the Seahawks to make one final push towards playoff relevancy. That division, the Cardinals look very, very good. They're still catchable given the schedule that they have going down the stretch. If the Seahawks are going to make a run at this thing, they're going to have to beat up on the 49ers, and they're going to have to make a statement, kind of like in college football where you want to run up the score to make an impression for the committee or whatever, BCS. I think the Seahawks are going to need to make a statement to the NFL that we're still in this thing. And I don't think that the 49ers really have anything on their roster. There's a couple of good pieces, and we've talked about that in weeks past. I don't think there's anything that the 49ers have that can really give Seattle trouble. Seattle's offensive line is still garbage. It's just as bad as the 49ers' offensive line at this juncture. But Russell Wilson's a much better quarterback than Kaepernick, and he's a much better quarterback than Gabbert. And even without the weapons that they have, I think that offense is going to keep the 49ers' defense from overcommitting because it's just not as talented as, say, the Cardinals' defense where they could drop back a bunch of guys and create interceptions. So I think that Seattle's probably going to run away with this one pretty quickly, just because they have to. And but with Gabbert, I do agree with you on that point that Gabbert is going to look a lot better than Kaepernick. And I think that we talked about it a couple weeks back. The tight end has to get involved. So if you're a Selleck fantasy owner, I don't know all four of you out there who might actually have Selleck on your fantasy team. That's a pretty good play this week. What can the Niners do with Gabbert that they can't do, that they weren't able to do with Kaepernick to maybe attack this damn good Seahawks defense?
Well, I think more than anything, take care of the football. I just think, Gabbert did have 2 picks in the first start, but one of them was one that bounced off of Jerome Simpson.
Yeah.
I think you just take care of the football, try to run the football, try to control the clock, win the time of possession. I think there's a couple things to remember here. One, Seattle's secondary is not playing to the same level they have in the past.
Right.
They only have 3 interceptions all year. It's the lowest in the entire NFL. Also, Marshawn Lynch, who has owned the 49ers and looked great against the Niners.
Awesome on that Thursday night game.
In the first matchup. He's only averaging 3.5 yards a carry. Mm-hmm. He's running behind a really bad line. So I really expect this game to be fairly close. Okay. Until the second half, late second half, where I think Seattle will pull away. I think 49ers will have some success. I think they'll score a couple touchdowns. That'll be my guess. But overall, I think you're right. Seattle's they got a better quarterback. They've got a star running back. They really have 2. Thomas Rawls.
Yeah, he looks awesome.
Yeah, if Marshawn can't go, Rawls is going to step in and do just fine. I think this game could get away from him in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But Bolden is a key guy because Bolden is a guy who, in the past, I think Kaepernick has just been so fearful of throwing to Richard Sherman's side of the field that it kind of took Bolden out of the equation.
Right.
I don't think Gabbert's going to play that same way.
I agree with that. We just don't know what we're going to get from Bolden, frankly, on Sunday. When he's played these last the last couple times he's played with that hamstring injury, you remember that Thursday night game, he was barely able to get up and down the field, which led to him missing the next 2 games. If he's not at 100%, he's not really worth playing. But that then gives you a pretty crappy wide receiver core to work with against a secondary like that. Sherman's been interesting. Watching that Sunday night game against the Cardinals, they've moved him around the field a lot more. It used to be they put him out on the island, he would shut down one side of the field. But with the personnel changes that they've had on that defense, losing, who was the guy who went to Maxwell?
Byron Maxwell
Right.
went to Philly.
He went to Philly. When they lost Maxwell, that changed the entire paradigm for Sherman, and he looks very susceptible now. He had one play, I believe it was Floyd who caught it in the back of the end zone, just a beautiful ball from Carson Palmer, second quarter, third quarter, where he'd get just straight burnt. And he made a terrible play on the ball, and it was something that you would expect out of a 49er corner, not Richard Sherman, the all-exalted Richard Sherman. He's not as dominant as he once was. I mean, and that's not just ESPN Bovarding making up stuff to explain away why there's only 3 interceptions in that secondary. He has lost a step, and he looks mentally wigged out a little bit because he hasn't gotten an interception this season. He's jumping too early on balls. He's overextending himself where he used to be cool, calm, and collected, and sometimes bored. They can attack Richard Sherman with Blaine Gabbert, which is kind of a shocking thing to say. But I think that it would be better if Anquan Bowl was 100%, but whoever they're going to put up against Sherman, whoever the Seahawks deem Sherman worthy, because he's going to go and take the number 1 guy wherever he is on the field instead of just being on one side of the field, they need to attack them because there is some susceptibility there, and if you allow Sherman to get some confidence, he's going to get back into his element, and then he's going to be that dominant shutdown corner that we've seen. So whether it's Bruce Ellington or it's Torrey Smith, I mean, if Torrey Smith ever needed a really good game in his career, this is the game he needs. If he can get one-on-one against Richard Sherman, a guy who is scuffling right now, and show up, all will be forgiven, and the 49ers fans' heads, in my opinion. I mean, am I off base on that one?
Well, I don't see the regression that you're talking about that much with Sherman. I think more than anything, the 49ers in the past have just not had the good matchup with him. He's a big corner.
Right.
He was a late round pick because he doesn't run a great 40 times, so he is susceptible to being burned deep in the deep quadrants of the field by speed receivers. They haven't had that player. I mean, they've had Bolden on one side and Crabtree on the other, and so it just really played.
That's 2 possession receivers.
Well, and it just played into really what he does best. He wants he wants to mug the receivers and hug up on them and play press coverage and challenge at the line and jam the receivers and disrupt the rhythm. Now the 49ers roll into this game with Quentin Patton and Bruce Ellington and Torrey Smith and DeAndrew White,
right,
and the ability in Jerome Simpson and guys who can stretch the field, guys who can run a little bit. So the matchup is no longer ideal for Sherman. I think you'll see the same. I think you will see the 49ers have more success against him. I don't know that he's slipped as much as it's a rush and cover league, and their rush has been largely inconsistent. And so that leads to struggles in coverage. He's still, I would say, one of the NFL's top-tier corners. I don't think he's the best, but I think he is among the best. I would say he's a top 10 NFL corner still, but he's susceptible to be beaten over the top. And how aggressive will he play, or will he keep things in front of him? In the past, he's challenged the 49ers and said, you know what, well, you're not going to throw the ball over my head. And they have not been able to do it. Now they have the personnel to do it. We'll see if Sunday they make it happen.
Right, because when we watched Gabbert against Atlanta, they kept the offense pretty vanilla. They didn't challenge down the field but once or twice. Had a couple weeks now. Obviously, that is the susceptibility of this Seahawks defense. Will they allow him to do it? I mean, at a certain point, the quarterback can only do what the quarterback's asked to do. And Blaine Gabbert's going to do what he's been asked to do. Will the 49ers challenge this Seahawks defense? Do they have confidence in Blaine Gabbert? They didn't seem to have any problem putting the ball in Kaepernick's hand and telling him to throw it deep. Will they do the same for Gabbert?
Will the O-line protect long enough for Gabbert to have the time? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, are we going to see Jordan Devey, or are we going to see Andrew Tiller?
Yeah.
Are we going to see Eric Pierce, or are we going to see Trenton Brown? I mean, they've been shuffling on the offensive line, some young players, some pretty poor players. Can they protect Gabbert, who's not all that mobile? Can they protect him long enough?
I disagree with that, though. I thought he might not move a lot in the pocket, but that guy can get out of the pocket with, a lot better than I think anyone expected. He showed that against Atlanta, and I think that he looked better outside of the pocket as a mobile quarterback, the quintessential mobile quarterback.
But you're still talking about a guy who's 6'5", 235.
Yeah.
He's not a track. He's not going to get out in the pocket. He can move a little bit. He's not the most unathletic guy, but he's still 6'5", 235. They're going to rush him hard, and now the question is, can they protect him long enough for the receivers to make those double moves to get down the field and try to shake free? Not necessarily down the field as much as
use the full 52.
Yeah, use the width of the field and kind of make them play coverage.
And that goes back to the original point. This 49ers rushing attack had a little bit of something with Sean Drone against Atlanta. Atlanta can't really do anything against the run, so maybe it's a false flag. But at the same time, the 49ers do need to establish a run game. And Seattle, who has a lot of the same offensive problems as the 49ers, bad offensive line, wide receivers that might not necessarily be able to separate, but a good running back, they came out that Thursday night and they just said, we're going to run it, and we're going to break you up, and then we're going to do whatever we want after that. And if the 49ers don't have Carlos Hyde, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't try to establish the run early and force the Seahawks to be honest. Because if you don't make them honest, they're going to blitz you all day, and then you never have those double move. You never have time to go on those double moves. You never have time to challenge. You're just doing screen passes and little 5-yard curls to Selleck all night. That's how it goes.
That doesn't sound like a great recipe for success,
right.
though. Sean Drone, establishing Sean Drone against the Seahawks in their building. What?
Yeah.
Could it happen? I guess, but I agree with you. You have to run it just to keep them honest. But I think what you're going to see in this game is you're going to see them take away I think they'll pass it more than they have in the past, and I think they'll try to attack with a short passing game, because I don't think they'll have success running at Bobby Wagner or Sean Drone.
No.
But you never know. You never know. The one thing with the 49er offensive line is that Tiller and Brown on the right side give you a little bit more run pop in the run game, and if they go with that combo for any amount of time, they may have more success running it than I anticipate.
Right. We just don't know what we're getting with that combination. We haven't seen enough of them.
Piers and Devy have struggled.
We know
to
what we're
open
getting
holes.
with them. Yeah.
Brown's a big body. He's 360, 370. Yeah. Tiller's a road grader. He's a real strong run blocker. They go with that tandem. I believe Tiller played like 90% of the snaps last week at guard. Brown got a handful of snaps.
He got about 6 snaps. Yeah.
If they feature Tiller and Brown, that may be an indication that they're going to attempt to run it at Seattle, even with Sean Drone.
Yeah.
And who knows? Those guys are such strong run blockers, maybe they'll have a little success.
We haven't seen Tiller and Brown play together. When they had Brown in, they moved Piers over to right guard. So if they do come out with that one, it'll just be interesting on the notion of we've never seen these two guys play together, save for maybe a couple of snaps in the preseason, which is hardly the Seattle defense. But yeah, I think that you might as well try it out now. We know exactly what Devy and Pears are going to give you on the right side, and it's not going to be enough to beat Seattle. Go with the new guys, put them, toss them in the pool and teach them how to swim. Because if they can get it done against these guys, they can get it done against anybody in the league, and then you have something going here. But you're not going to find out against Atlanta, and you're not going to find out against Detroit or the Bears. This is as good of a test as you're going to have. Arizona next week, but. You got to let them sink or swim in this situation.
Well, Marcus Martin's an interesting guy to watch this week too, because Marcus Martin, Daniel Kilgore started practicing. I think it's a pretty, preconceived notion at this point that next week for the Arizona game, the Niners are probably going to sit down Marcus Martin for Daniel Kilgore at center. So I would expect Martin. He understands the score. I expect Martin to play his best game. Yeah. I think he'll be assigned. I think he'll be on his assignments, and I think whatever he can do, I think you're going to see out of him, because he understands. Kilgore's most likely going to take his spot at center, but if he shows something, and it'll be interesting to see if they move Martin to guard,
right?
Because will they play Martin at right guard next year in a rotation, or next week in a rotation with Tiller and Devy,
right,
if they go with Kilgore at center? So that's just another thing to look at. I expect Martin to play well. And I expect the 49ers to have some success running it if they go with Tiller and Brown on the right side.
You look at that Thursday night game, the Seahawks brought A-gap pressure pretty much all game. They squared up Martin, and maybe
he can't handle that pressure.
He isn't. He's barely able to handle a nose guard at this juncture. Much less blitzing linebackers. So guy under the radar that you think is going to have a nice game, I'm going Vance McDonald. I think that the Seahawks don't do a very good job in covering the tight ends. I think that especially with that pass rush, there's going to be a lot of just quick drop-off passes to the tight end in the system, a little block and go. So I got Vance McDonald for a guy who might have a good game sort of under the radar going into it. Who do you have?
Well, the two guys that I think I'm looking for in this game, one, Jaquaski Tard, who
Right.
continues to play outstanding football. I think he's going to, he's getting better every week.
He's been awesome.
So,
Yeah. I really like him.
He's a guy that I'm going to be looking for. And the other guy is Bruce Ellington. I think Ellington has more there than what he's demonstrated. I think it's a good matchup for him. I think you're going to see them use him on short passes, and I think he'll have his most productive game as a Niner.
So very little storyline, nothing to really talk about heading into this game. Yeah, it should be fascinating, even if it is low scoring. A lot to figure out for the Niners, a lot to figure out for the Seahawks in a game that they desperately need, in a game that if the 49ers can figure out a way to win this one would mean a lot to just solidifying what seems to be an area of chaos down in Santa Clara. A lot riding on this one despite the records. So we'll find out what happens on Sunday. You can join Larry Krueger for the pregame show, 10 a.m. on KMBR 680. The kickoff is at 1:25 on the very same station at 107.7 The Bone. We'll check in with you after the game. Plenty to talk about surely after that. Till then, good night, Australia.
Nice.